Okay, so this is a thing about cortosis. Why? Because I've been in the uh, process of doing these videos, one about an episode, one about a thing that's a major plot point in the episode. And now we get to cortosis. Interesting thing about cortosis is that it's a material that, well, rare isn't only on one planet. And that's the thing to remember about this is that it's mostly a thing from legends. However, it's become extremely common in legends. So, and it's actually one of those things where it's like the logical implications of having it are one of those things where it's expensive to make. It needs special maintenance to use it properly. But it's very useful. But again, it's one of those like high cost, high reward things. There's only a few places in the galaxy that have usable quantities of it. It's difficult to produce into a useful form, although people did come up with some alloys that are just, they're not even close to pure cortosis, but they have greater durability than a similar alloy that doesn't have cortosis. Now, as it was used in the Acolyte, it basically gets thrown at viewers in episode 5. See, you kind of sort of see it in previous episodes because if you look at Chimere, you can actually see the mask in his backpack. But, it's mostly covered up, so you can't actually get a good look at the mask. And also, he has an armband, which, believe it or not, in Legends, the armband was actually a rather standard way of using cortosis. Just like, oh, hey, yeah, I have this cortosis shield on my left arm, which, again, that is the same arm that Chimere had it on. Left arm has the Cortosis shield. Right arm is his primary lightsaber. Left hand, if he's using it, is the secondary smaller lightsaber. Which is, okay, that's cool. Um, about this though, as a plot device, dumping it into the middle of a fight and having him use it willy nilly a few times and not even consistently in the fight, that was um awkward from a storytelling perspective because while people who are familiar with it already are going to be like, oh, cool, it's that. Anyone who's not already familiar with it is going to be confused by what's going on. And the series hadn't even touched on the idea of its existence before. Not even, you know, using it without naming it. But because actually they don't even name it until the sixth episode. It gets used several times in the fifth episode to block lightsabers, but they don't ever name it in the fifth episode. It gets named in the sixth episode. Uh, Makes it even more awkward. You know, that's the thing about this that gets a bit weird. And personally, something I think was a bad planning thing because Seeding the idea that this exists earlier in would have been a much better idea. And again, I'm doing this from a TTRPG perspective, and I've been blathering about generic story beats. But from a TTRPG perspective, it's not necessarily a good idea to be like, oh, yeah, by the way, this guy has armor that makes him immune to your weapons. Suck it. And in a boss fight, that's generally something players in a TTRPG dislike, shall we say. But anyways, so one of the ideas I had was for May when she's during her assassination of Indara to have used Cortosis as an unfair edge when fighting Indara, but not as armor, but a dagger with just enough Cortosis in the dagger to short out Indara's lightsaber. That way, Indara getting caught off guard and stabbed to death in the middle of a fight kind of makes sense because someone did genuinely catch her off guard. Whereas what happened in the show was just kind of lame. It's like a basic distraction gambit. Just yeah, well. Anyways, but yes, like that. I personally think that would have made the Indara scene better, and giving people something to ponder and question. It's like, wait a second, how did she do that? When the lightsaber craps out, would have see given people something to look forward to later, which ultimately is something the Indara fight generally failed at. 'Cause, okay, each of the two assassinations in the first two episodes was used to set up a specific plot point. The Indara fight was used solely to set up the idea that May is alive. Nothing else. Which, given how much time they put into the fight, is kind of strange because of the fact that, well, I mean, in TTRPG terms, it was akin to, spending 30 minutes in a boss fight. It's just that long. Although, it's NPCs fighting each other, so your players wouldn't even be involved with that one, which is another thing about that aspect that's a bit weird is that, well, it does work for Hollywood storytelling, just like having multiple disconnected characters doing multiple disconnected character things. In a TTRPG, having non-player characters doing stuff makes the storytelling a little awkward. Ugh. Anyways, though, so yeah, it's like what they did with Cortosis was also a bit strange. It's like, what exactly is the point behind the helmet? He uses that whole gimmick of having the helmet prevent people from reading his mind, but other than stating that that was a benefit to the helmet, he doesn't explain it because that's not a property of Cortosis. It doesn't block the force. What it there was about the helmet that was preventing people from reading his mind is completely unknown. Also, the helmet has no eye holes and drastically limits your ability to hear as well. So, um, wearing it in combat means that he is relying on using the force as his senses to see the environment around him and is not able to physically see his opponents at all. because he has a big old slab of cortosis covering his eyes. Which, okay, that is actually a Jedi Master trick, though. Is like one of the things that Yoda taught Luke was don't rely on your eyes to see everything. Uh, Trust the Force to guide you. Blah 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 blah. Well, this is leaving out the eyes entirely and just using the Force, which apparently does at least work. But anyway, though, yeah, that's another thing about this is the number of locations involved with this is that because like there is actually a thing in at least one of the extended universe things with a method of making lightsabers so that they wouldn't short out when they hit cortosis and thus would actually let them cut through the cortosis. Why exactly the crystals make the blades curved into a katana shape? Probably just rule of cool. But hey, whatever. Now, there's another thing that's interesting. Unidentified planet. This unidentified planet is actually where Chimere, aka the Stranger, um, he's called the Stranger because they did not ever tell us what his real name is. Chimere is actually just an alias he used. Um, the Stranger lives here and has his base of operations here, and this is also apparently where he manufactured the Cortosis armor that he uses. However, his base of operations here is basically just a hut built into a cave, and that's about it. What is the name of this planet? That's an interesting question because, as I mentioned earlier, is that there are actually multiple planets where you can mine cortosis. Like mentioned Stenzo, Makivj, and the unknown planet. But a lot of people think the unknown planet is inspired by Baldemnik, which possible. However, at the same time, Baldemnik is an inhabited planet that you would need to be very careful to avoid pissing off the locals and having the locals hunt you down and murder you for stealing their cortosis. Because, yeah, there's already been a war fought over Baldemnik. Now, the idea that they decided to just make up a new one, yeah, that's a possibility. It's also it is also a possibility that the reason it's called unidentified planet is that the writers literally, when developing the story ideas, did not go any farther with that planet than planet where you can mine cortosis, and literally stopped thinking after that part, and didn't do anything to establish where it is uh, in the galaxy or what the planet is like outside of the cave slash rocky coastline that um, Chimera lives on. Which kind of weird, honestly. Just one of the things that's noteworthy about this thing here is that Chimera had lived there long enough to have actually set up a proper, base of operations. So definitely years. We don't know how long. And yeah. Yeah, Leslie Headland said the planet was meant to be similar to Octo. However, that seems to be purely an aesthetic similarity in that you have a rocky coastline with waves crashing over the rocks, and about as far as the similarity seems to go. Hmm, and that's about it, honestly. So it's like when using something like this in a TTRPG campaign, You don't want to just blindside people with it as like, haha, here's a problem for you to solve. Bye. Especially not in a boss fight. But, you know, especially if it's going to be something that's a recurring thing. Because we saw Jackie crack his helmet and then someone else broke the armband he was using. But he keeps using Cortosis armor later on anyways. Although he doesn't use it the same way he did the first time, so it kind of comes across as though he's trying to avoid a repeat of the first time. I don't know. The way the armor was getting used was super inconsistent, and it's not entirely clear what the writers were trying to do with it some of the time because, well, they, well, actually, that's another point is that he never does a block parry combo with the Cortosis. Something I personally found to be very, very strange because the fact that in theory you can just block a lightsaber strike with the Cortosis and then, counterattack while your opponent is defenseless. That's something he literally never does. Although he rather easily kills some of the Jedi through other means, and that makes it even more strange, is that when they actually have vulnerable openings, that's not when he's killing them. He's doing it when they're not open to attack. Yeah, strange writing. That is actually something, though, we would think about in a TTRPG is that, players counter strategizing, trying to deal with the Cortosis. One of the things that comes up is, the idea of dual wielding lightsabers. Like one of your lightsabers gets shorted out by hitting a Cortosis armor. Now you're wielding the other one. And you can just like switch to a lightsaber that is currently working. Which again, you actually do see Jackie at one point dual wield lightsabers, but all she does with it is a Berserker Barrage type speed attack, and then she gets a conventional block, and then he demonstrates that he actually does have a second lightsaber by stabbing her to death with his backup. Mm, doesn't actually uh, use the Cortosis to gank her, despite the fact that he actually shorted out her lightsabers more than once. He still didn't use the Cortosis to gank her, which is very strange because he definitely does gank her, just not using the Cortosis to do it. Yeah, from a TTRPG writing standpoint, Cortosis is a cool plot idea. I mean, mechanically in a TTRPG, I would consider giving it a percentage chance to work because, like the arm bracer thing, can you genuinely count on always being able to um, take a hit uh, just right in order to have the lightsaber blade short out? No. Can you count on actually parrying the lightsaber blade successfully? No. Or at least that's not how I would write it in a TTRPG. Like maybe, someone who's a really, really good Jedi Master might have a high chance of parry actions, but he's not going to be get guaranteed to pass. And that's one of those things I think they screwed up with actually writing the episode. But in a TTRPG, yeah, you're not going to have it so that like, oh, he has Cortosis armor. That means he's now immune to lightsabers. End of story. Nah, uh-uh. It, that's way too simplistic to make the combat fun in a TTRPG. Giving it as an unfair advantage for the boss enemy that your players have to take down. Well, that's all fun and games. But an unfair advantage shouldn't be I'm immune to everything except the plot convenient MacGuffin. That's not so much fun. People like to talk about railroading bad. Well, forcing players to only kill the boss one specific way is, kind of on the railroading spectrum, shall we say. Anyways, I think that's enough for now. My voice is about to die, anyways.